The Jrel Dominion had conquered 12 star systems in 12 cycles, and their war machines rolled across worlds like unstoppable storms. Commander Rex stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the sensor displays light up with new contacts. And his mandibles clicked in satisfaction, because the primitive signals coming from the third planet of the Sol system looked like easy prey. The humans had barely left their homeworld, and their fusion drives were laughable compared to Jrel Grividic. Technology and their weapons were primitive projectile throwers that any basic shield could deflect without effort. Rex had personally overseen the conquest of 6 species, and none had given the Dominion any real challenge once the warfleets arrived in their skies with weapons that could crack planets and shields that turned away every desperate attack. This new species would be no different. Small human vessel moved through the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets, and its single occupant had no idea that death watched from the darkness beyond, and the mining ship called Prospector 7 continued its work, cutting into rock and extracting metals while its pilot hummed an old song from Earth. Rex gave the order, and tractor beams lanced out across the void and grabbed the tiny ship like a giant hand plucking an insect from the air inside. The human vessel alarm shrieked, and the pilot fought against the invisible forces, dragging his ship toward the massive alien warship that had appeared from nowhere, and his hands flew across controls, trying every evasive maneuver he knew. The paralysis field hit him 30 seconds later, and Marcus Chun felt his muscles lock up as exotic radiation flooded his nervous system, and the last thing he saw before unconsciousness took him was the yawning hangar bay of the alien ship, swallowing his vessel whole. When Rex saw the human for the first time through the observation port, he felt a strange mixture of curiosity and contempt, because the creature looked soft and weak, with no natural armor or weapons, and no obvious advantages that would make it dangerous. Dr. Kesran arrived within the hour, and her sensory tendrils quivered with barely contained excitement as she examined the first intact specimen from this primitive world. The human was male according to their instruments and stood approximately 1.8 standard units, tall with dark hair and brown skin and eyes that remained closed and forced sleep. Kesran supervised the transfer personally as servitor drones moved the unconscious human into a crystalline containment cell that had once held a Vareth berserker for 2 full cycles before the creature finally exhausted itself trying to break free. The cell sat in the heart of the research facility on Jrel. Prime and the Fortress world had never fallen to enemy attack in the entire history of the Dominion because orbital defense platforms ringed the planet like a crown of thorns, and automated weapons systems could track and destroy 1,000 targets. Simultaneously watched the security feeds as the human was placed in the cell and restraints locked around its wrists and ankles. "How long before it wakes?" Rex asked. Kesran consulted her instruments, and her primary eyes focused on the biometric readings streaming across holographic displays. "Approximately 72 standard hours," she replied, and her voice carried the satisfied tone of a scientist who had just acquired a perfect specimen for study. "Their neural activity is remarkable," she continued, and gestured at the scans, showing the human brain even in unconscious state processing information at rates far beyond what their primitive technology suggested. Rex nodded, but his attention had already moved to other matters, because the human was secured and contained and posed no possible threat, and he had a war fleet to command and other worlds to prepare for conquest. What neither Rex nor Kesran understood was that Marcus Chen had not been a simple miner, and his background included 12 years as a United Nations Space Force Marine before he took the safer job of asteroid prospecting, and Marcus had volunteered for this mission, knowing exactly what would happen when the alien scouts detected his ship, because humanity had been watching the Jrel for 2 years and tracking their movements through the outer system and analyzing their technology through careful observation, and Earth needed someone inside their defenses, someone who could learn their language and map their facilities and find the weaknesses in their fortress. World someone expendable enough to risk, but skilled enough to survive. Marcus Chen had raised his hand when command asked for volunteers, and now he drifted in artificial sleep while alien instruments probed his body and recorded data that would teach them nothing important about human capabilities. On the third day, Marcus woke and his eyes opened slowly, taking in the crystalline walls and the sterile environment and the observation cameras watching his every movement. He sat up carefully, testing the restraints and finding them loosened now that the aliens believed he posed no threat. Israel guards stood outside the transparent wall, and its compound eyes tracked Marcus with the bored attention of someone assigned to watch something harmless. Marcus looked back at the guard and began counting and observing and cataloging everything he could see. Cell measured approximately 4 meters by 4 meters, and the crystalline substance seemed to generate its own light from within, and power feeds ran along the eastern wall, connecting to some external source. Guards rotated every 8 hours, and during shift changes, there was a 3-minute gap when sensors went offline for maintenance cycling. The facility itself sprawled across the northern continent of Drell Prime, and through the single window in his cell, Marcus could see a purple sky and distant mountains and occasional transport craft moving between buildings. He noted everything and forgot nothing because humans were persistence hunters, and pattern recognition engines and memory was their greatest evolutionary advantage. Dr. Keshran arrived on the 4th day and began her examinations. She spoke constantly to her assistants, describing procedures and noting observations, and never imagining that the primitive human could possibly understand the sophisticated Drell language. But Marcus listened and absorbed, and his brain worked on the problem of their speech patterns like a code waiting to be broken. By day 10, he understood basic concepts. By day 20, he was functionally fluent. He learned from guards who complained about duty rotations, and he learned from maintenance workers who discussed technical specifications while servicing his cell, and he learned from Keshran herself, who dictated detailed notes about human biology and weakness and potential uses in the labor cast. Marcus played the role they expected, and he cooperated during examinations and ate the nutrient paste they provided, and even allowed tissue samples without resistance. All the while his mind worked and planned and prepared. He learned that 14 species served the Dominion in various capacities, and all of them had been broken and made compliant through generations of servitude. He learned that the Drell military would gather on this world in 40 days for their cycle of conquest celebration, when the High Command reviewed victories and planned new campaigns. He learned about fleet deployments and supply lines and the location of every human they had captured in labor camps across 3 systems. And Marcus, who had studied military history and knew how empires fell, began to see the shape of what needed to happen. On day 28, Dr. Keshran made a casual observation while examining his stress responses. The subject exhibits no aggression markers whatsoever, she told her assistant, while Marcus lay strapped to the examination table pretending not to understand. Humans may prove ideal for domestic labor assignments, she continued, and made notes in her datapad. Marcus said nothing, but behind his calm expression, his mind raced with calculations. He had learned enough. Now came the hard part. Marcus had been in the crystalline cell for 32 days when he finally made his move, and the guards had grown comfortable with the quiet human who never caused problems. The Marcus shift change happened exactly as he had predicted at the 8th hour, when one team left and another arrived, and for 3 minutes the sensor systems cycled offline for maintenance. Marcus had spent weeks studying that 3-minute gap and memorizing the exact timing and preparing for the moment when he would have to move faster than he ever had in his life. When the power feed cycled, he was already at the eastern panel where the locking mechanism connected to the external power source. The Drell believed their crystalline cells were indestructible, and they were right about that, but the locking mechanism was just advanced technology and Marcus had spent 12 years learning how to break things that people thought were unbreakable. His fingers found the access port and the small piece of metal he had carefully shaped from a food tray over weeks of patient work slid into the gap, and he twisted and felt something click. The restraint field collapsed. Marcus moved. The first guard died without understanding what hit him because Marcus knew where Jor-El kept their primary respiratory organs. Low beneath the thorax plating where instinct made them protect their brain instead. The guard's weapon became Marcus's weapon, and he understood how it worked because he had watched guards check and clean their equipment hundreds of times. The second guard came around the corner and died before his compound eyes could fully process the human standing free in the corridor. The third guard managed to raise an alarm, but Marcus was already moving, and the energy bolt took the alien in the center mass before any sound escaped. Then Marcus disappeared. The Jor-El lockdown procedures were impressive, and every door sealed and every sensor activated, and hunter drones deployed from wall ports to search for the escaped prisoner. That they were looking for a human running through corridors, trying to escape the facility. Marcus had no intention of escaping. He went down instead of up and into the maintenance infrastructure instead of toward exits. Every ventilation shaft and power conduit and service tunnel had been mapped in his mind. During long hours of observation and listening to maintenance workers discuss their routes, Jor-El had never fought an enemy that could fit into spaces designed for automated systems and move through their infrastructure. Like water flowing through pipes, Marcus spent 6 days living in the walls. He ate from supply caches meant for long-term emergencies and drank from water recycling systems, and most importantly, he moved through the facility learning everything the Jor-El had tried to keep hidden. He watched from ventilation grates as officers discussed security protocols. He listened from ceiling spaces as technicians debated the best routes through the command complex. He observed shift changes and guard rotations and the casual conversations that revealed access codes and hierarchical structures. The Jor-El security forces searched frantically, but humans were persistent hunters who evolved chasing prey across endless grasslands, and Marcus had patience that the aliens could not comprehend. On the 7th day, he made his way to the Archestron's laboratory and waited. She arrived alone, as she always did in the early morning hours when her assistants had not yet begun their shifts. Marcus sat in her chair wearing a guard uniform that almost fit his human frame, and the stolen weapon rested steady in his face. Hans Gessrin's sensory tendrils went rigid when she saw him. "Hello, Doctor," Marcus said in perfect Jor-El. Scientist's compound eyes widened in shock, because the primitive human should not be capable of speech, and definitely should not be speaking their language with grammatical precision. "Subject 0, she managed, and her voice carried undertones of fear. "My name is Marcus Chen," he replied, and gestured to a chair with the weapon. "Sit." Gessrin sat. "You are going to help me access your communication networks." Marcus continued, and his tone remained calm and almost friendly. "Why would I do that?" Gessrin asked. "Because I am giving you a choice your people never gave mine." Marcus replied, "What choice?" "Surrender before the rest of my species arrives." Gessrin made the chittering sound that passed for Jor-El laughter. "Your world has barely achieved spaceflight," she said, and some of her fear faded as she remembered the primitive fusion drives and projectile weapons. "We have conquered 14 species and command 6 warfleets, and our orbital defenses have never been breached." "That is going to change," Marcus said simply. "Impossible." Gessrin responded, and her scientific mind rejected the notion that primitives could challenge the Dominion. Marcus leaned forward, and his dark eyes held hers. "Your people made a mistake, Doctor," he said quietly. "You studied my body and thought you understood humans, but you never studied our history." "History is irrelevant," Gessrin replied. "History is everything," Marcus countered. "My species climbed to the top of our world's food chain using nothing but sharpened rocks and persistence, and we remember every lesson learned in a million Years of survival. He stood and moved to her computer terminal. You took one of us, he continued while accessing her system with credentials he had stolen from a dead guard. You thought you were capturing a primitive specimen for study, but you were really giving us exactly what we needed. What did we give you? Kesrin asked. Time, Marcus replied, and information and motivation. His fingers moved across the holographic interface with practiced ease. Do you know what humans do when someone takes one of ours? He asked. Kesrin's tendrils curled in confusion. We come for them, Marcus answered his own question. Every time, and without exception, and we do not stop until we get them back or die trying. He pulled up the communication network protocols and began composing messages. You are going to help me send 3 transmissions, he told Kesrin. The first goes to Earth and tells them where I am, and that your defenses will be down in 72 hours. Madness, Kesrin whispered. The second goes to all 14 species you have enslaved. Marcus continued. It tells them to rise up because humanity is coming, and we do not believe in empires built on slavery. They will never rebel, Kesrin said, but her voice lacked conviction. The third message goes to your high command, Marcus finished. It explains what happens when you capture a human. He looked at her directly. You can help me willingly, or I can force you, he said. But these messages are being sent either way. Kesrin stared at the human, and for the first time in her long career as a xenobiologist, she realized she had completely misunderstood her subject. This was not a primitive specimen, this was a predator. What do you need? She asked quietly. Marcus smiled. Access codes to the military communication hub, he replied, and the location of your planetary defense control center. Kesrin's primary hands trembled as she entered. Her credentials. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because you made it personal, Marcus replied. You did not just attack Earth or threaten our ships, but you took one of us and studied him like an animal. His voice remained calm, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Humans are very good at holding grudges, Doctor, he continued. We will cross the galaxy to settle a score, and we will burn down empires to rescue one of our own. The communication hub protocols appeared on the screen. Thank you, Marcus said. Now we are going to walk to the military complex, and you are going to get me inside. They will kill us both, Kesrin said. Probably, Marcus agreed. But I already sent a coded signal to Earth 3 days ago using your own equipment. Kesrin's tendrils went rigid. Impossible, she breathed. You underestimated what humans can learn in 32 days of careful observation, Marcus replied. My people are already coming, and nothing you do will stop that. He gestured toward the door. The only question now is whether the Jrel Dominion surrenders peacefully or gets torn apart. Kesrin stood on unsteady limbs. You are one human, she said. One human who has lived in your walls for 6 days without being caught, Marcus countered. One human who speaks your language and knows your systems and has already compromised your security. He moved toward the door. Imagine what my entire species can do when we arrive. They walked together through the early morning corridors, and nobody stopped them because Kesrin's credentials granted access everywhere, and the human beside her looked like just another guard in stolen uniform. Marcus had learned that the Jrel hierarchy was rigid and absolute, and orders from superiors went unquestioned, so he acted like he belonged, and people saw what they expected to see. Military complex rose 300 kilometers south of the research facility, and transportation systems connected the 2 locations through underground tunnels. Marcus and Kesrin rode in silence while above them the purple sky lightened with the rising of Jrel Prime's twin suns. What will your people do to mine? Kesrin finally asked. Marcus considered the question. That depends on what you do in the next 72 hours. He replied, but we are not you, Doctor, and we do not build empires on slavery. The transport arrived at the military complex, and they stepped out into a cathedral of war. The military communication hub occupied 20 floors in the central tower of the Jurel Command Complex and Quantum. Processors humbled with faster-than-light relay systems that connected the Dominion's scattered fleets across dozens of star systems. Marcus stood at a terminal on the 18th floor, while the Orchestrum provided access codes that her high-security clearance should never have possessed. But scientific curiosity had led her to accumulate over decades of service. Guards moved through the corridors outside, but none questioned the xenobiologist and her assistant. And humans had learned thousands of years ago that confidence and proper credentials could open almost any door. Marcus began composing the first message, and his fingers moved across the holographic interface with absolute certainty. The transmission to Earth was simple and direct. Chen Marcus service number 284-79164 Sierra, reporting from hostile territory at coordinates attached and captured by alien force designated Jurel Dominion and currently inside their command infrastructure on Fortress World, and planetary defenses will be disabled in 72 hours. And if United Nations Space Force wants to make a statement about what happens when you capture humans, now is the time. He encrypted it with codes that only Earth Military Command would recognize and sent it on a tight beam transmission toward Sol. The second message went to all 14 conquered species on every frequency the Dominion used for communication. This is a human from Sol 3, and my people have a saying about those who make peaceful revolution impossible, making violent revolution inevitable. And your captors took one of us, and in 3 days you will see what happens next and rise up, because we are coming. The third message went directly to Jurel High Command, and Marcus crafted it carefully. You captured the wrong species, and humanity remembers every slight and every stolen soul and every act of aggression. And we crossed our own world, hunting mammoths with sharpened sticks, and we will cross the galaxy to get our people back and see you soon. He sent all 3 messages simultaneously. Alarms began shrieking within seconds. They know, Kesrin said. Her tendrils curled in fear. They were always going to know, Marcus replied calmly. Now we move to Phase 2. He pulled up a schematic of the planetary defense network and studied the control protocols, the orbital platforms that protected Jurel. Prime represented the pinnacle of Dominion military technology and automated weapon systems that could track and destroy thousands of targets simultaneously, and shield generators that could deflect planet-killing weapons, all of it controlled from a central hub located in the sublevels beneath the command complex. We need to go down, Marcus said. Security forces were already mobilizing, and heavy footsteps echoed through nearby corridors, and Kesrin looked at Marcus with something approaching respect mixed with terror. Why did you volunteer for this? She asked as they moved toward the emergency stairwell. Because someone had to, Marcus replied. They descended 18 floors, while above them, the command complex erupted into Kaushral. Soldiers flooded the upper levels searching for the escaped human, and senior officers shouted contradictory orders, and nobody quite understood how a primitive specimen had penetrated their most secure facility. Marcus and Kesrin reached the sublevel access door, and her credentials opened it without hesitation. The Defense Control Center spread before them like a war room from ancient Earth, and holographic displays showed every orbital platform and weapon system and shield generator in real time. Technicians worked at various stations, and they looked up in surprise. When the door opened, Marcus shot 2 of them before they could react. The third raised his hands in surrender. Override codes for the defense network, Marcus demanded in perfect. Jurel technician's compound eyes flickered between Marcus and the weapon. I cannot give you those, he stammered. You can, and you will, Marcus replied. Or you die here and I take them from your computer anyway. The technician's resistance crumbled, and he provided the codes. Marcus moved to the central control terminal and began inputting commands. What are you doing? Kesrin asked. Giving my people a chance, Marcus answered. His Fingers flew across the interface as he accessed system after system. Orbital defense grid of Jor-El Prime represented centuries of military engineering and nothing short of a full fleet. Assault should have been able to breach it, but Marcus was not assaulting it from outside. He was shutting it down from within. Disabling primary shield generators, he said aloud while working. Deactivating automated weapons platforms and putting tracking systems into maintenance mode, unlocking all controls with biometric verification. Kesrin watched in horror as the holographic display shifted from green to amber to red. "You are leaving my world defenseless," she whispered. "I am giving your leaders a choice," Marcus corrected. "Surrender peacefully or face what happens when you make humanity angry." Commander Vrex arrived 18 minutes later with a full security team, and they found Marcus and Kesrin barricaded behind overturned equipment in the control center. Defense grid was completely offline. "Surrender, human," Vrex commanded, and his voice carried the authority of someone who had conquered 6 species. "Your world cannot possibly mount a response, and even if they received your message, their primitive ships would take months to arrive." Marcus smiled from behind his improvised barricade. "Funny thing about humans, Commander," he called back. "We are really good at lying to people studying us." Vrex's mandibles clicked in confusion. "Your scouts reported fusion drives and projectile weapons," Marcus continued. "All true, but we have been watching you radar outer system for 2 years and reverse engineering debris from your scout ships that you did not know we recovered." He checked the chronometer on his stolen datapad. 72 hours ago, I sent a coded signal using Dr. Kesrin's equipment. He said, "Earth has been preparing for this moment, and right now 47 destroyer-class vessels are moving into position." "Impossible," Vrex said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "You thought you were abducting a simple miner," Marcus replied. "You were really giving us a volunteer who would get captured and studied and learn everything about your language and systems and defenses." Kesrin's tendrils trembled as understanding finally dawned. "You let yourself be taken," she said. Marcus nodded. "Someone had to get inside your fortress world and map your facilities and find your weaknesses and be in position to disable your defenses at exactly the right moment." He looked at Vrex. "I volunteered for this mission, knowing I might never go home," he continued. "But humans do not abandon their own, and we do not forget, and we do not forgive when you take one of us." Vrex consulted his own datapad, and his carapace turned pale. Long-range sensors are detecting multiple contacts at the system edge, one of his officers reported. 47 vessels dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Marcus stood slowly and kept his weapon ready. "Those are Earth's destroyers," he said, "built in secret and equipped with weapons designed specifically for Jor-El shield frequencies that we analyze from captured technology." He moved toward the barricade edge. "Your orbital defenses are offline and locked with biometric codes that will take your technicians days to break." He continued, "Your war fleets are scattered across a dozen systems fighting rebellions that my second message just triggered." Rex's weapon lowered slightly. "What do you want?" he asked. "Unconditional surrender," Marcus replied. "Release of every human in your labor camps and freedom for all 14 species you had enslaved, and complete dismantling of your tributary system." "And if we refuse?" Rex challenged. Marcus gestured to the displays showing Earth's fleet advancing. "Then my people demonstrate what happens when you capture a human," he said quietly. "We are persistence hunters, Commander, and we will chase you across the galaxy if necessary. And we will not stop until every single human is free or your dominion is ash." The Defense Control Center fell silent except for the soft humming of overtaxed processors. Vrex looked at his officers and saw fear in their eyes. He looked at the displays showing his world's defenses completely offline. He looked at Marcus, Chun standing calm and ready behind the barricade. "How did your species achieve this level of technology so quickly?" Rex asked. We did not, Marcus admitted. We had it for years, but we let you see only what we wanted you to see, and humans learned long ago that enemies who underestimate you are easier to defeat. He lowered his weapon slightly. You thought we were primitive because we used fusion drives, he continued. But we were testing you and learning your patterns and preparing for the day you made the mistake of taking one of us. Kesrin stepped forward. Commander, she said quietly, I have studied this species extensively, and I believe he is telling the truth about human persistence and memory. She looked at Marcus. They will not stop until they get their people back. Rex's shoulders sagged. In defeat, I am authorized to discuss terms of surrender, he said finally. The words hung in the air like a death sentence for the Dominion. Marcus activated the communication terminal. You have 1 hour to release every human in your custody, he transmitted to the incoming Earth fleet. Then we will discuss terms. Admiral Okafor's response came back strong and clear. Acknowledged, Chun, and well done, Marine. Marcus felt something tight in his chest finally relax. He had done it, one human against an empire. And he had won. The first shuttle from Earth fleet arrived 3 hours after Commander Rex's surrender, and Marcus stood in the landing bay, watching it descend through Drell Prime's purple atmosphere. Dr. Kesrin stood beside him under guard, and her sensory tendrils moved in patterns that Marcus had learned meant deep contemplation. I studied your biology for 32 days, she said quietly while the shuttle touched down. I cataloged your physical limitations and measured your strength and calculated your potential uses in labor assignments. The shuttle's doors opened and United Nations Space Force Marines emerged in full combat gear. But I never understood what you were. Kesrin continued. Marcus turned to look at her. What am I, Doctor? He asked. A weapon disguised as a specimen, she replied. A volunteer who knew he might die but went anyway, because your species cannot abandon its own. Marcus smiled slightly. We are persistence hunters, he said. We evolved chasing prey across grasslands for days until it collapsed from exhaustion, and we brought that same patience to the stars. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez approached and saluted. Good to see you alive, Chun, she said. Good to be alive, Marcus replied. Martinez looked around the Drell facility with professional interest. Command wants a full debrief, she said. But first, we are extracting every human from this rock. There are 300 in the northern labor camps, Marcus told her, and approximately 2,000 more scattered across 3 systems. Martinez's expression hardened. We will get all of them, she promised. The extraction took 6 days. Earth's destroyers moved through Drell space with absolute authority, and the Dominion's scattered fleets had been ordered to stand down while terms of surrender were negotiated. Marcus accompanied the rescue teams to the labor camps, and what he saw there hardened something in his soul. Humans working in toxic environments without proper protection, humans confined to cells barely large enough to lie down, humans who have been taken from mining ships and exploration vessels and scientific expeditions over the past 2 years. Some of them wept when they saw the UNSF insignia. Others simply stared in disbelief. The rescue had actually come. Marcus spoke to each one and learned their names and remembered their stories, because that was what humans died in the 4th day. Admiral Okafor summoned Marcus to the flagship Indomitable. The Admiral was a tall woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen combat across 3 campaigns. Sit, Marine, she commanded. Marcus sat. Your mission was to get captured and gather intelligence, Okafor said, while reviewing reports on her datapad. Instead, you shut down their entire planetary defense grid and triggered a multi-system rebellion and forced the surrender of an interstellar empire. I saw an opportunity, Admiral, Marcus replied. Okafor looked up from her datapad. You exceeded mission parameters by approximately 1,000%. She said, then she smiled. Well done. Marcus felt tension he had been carrying for weeks Finally release. The Jrel made a mistake taking our people, he said. I just made sure they understood that mistake. Oh, they understand, Okafor agreed. They're high. Command is negotiating surrender terms, and every tributary species is demanding independence, and their empire is collapsing faster than our analysts predicted. She pulled up a star chart showing Jrel territory. 14 species are inactive. Rebellion, she continued. 6 war fleets have surrendered without firing a shot, and 3 planetary governors have already requested Earth protection from their own government. Marcus studied the chart. What happens now? He asked. Now we teach the galaxy what humanity stands for. Okafor replied. We free the enslaved species and dismantle the tributary system and make sure everyone understands what happens when you capture a human. She looked directly at Marcus. You started something, Chung, and now we have to finish it properly. The negotiations took 3 weeks. The Jrel High Command sat across from human diplomats in a commandeered government building on Jrel Prime, and the discussions were tense, but ultimately one side, Earth, held all the advantages. The Dominion's defenses remained offline, and their fleets were scattered, and rebellions burned across their territory. They had no choice but to accept human terms. All humans would be released immediately with full reparations. All 14 enslaved species would be granted independence. The tributary system would be completely dismantled. Jrel military forces would be reduced to defensive levels. Only Earth would establish monitoring stations to ensure compliance, and the Jrel would publicly acknowledge their crimes and apologize. Commander Vrex signed the documents with trembling hands. Dr. Kessrin watched from the observer's gallery, and later she requested a private meeting with Marcus. They met in the research facility, where Marcus had spent his first 32 days in captivity. I want to understand, Kessrin said as they stood outside his former cell. Why show mercy to those who showed you none? Marcus looked through the crystalline wall at the space where he had been imprisoned. Because we are not you, he replied simply. Revenge would be easy. He continued, we could destroy your military and occupy your worlds and make your people serve us the way you made others serve you. He turned to face her, but that would make us no better than you were. Kessrin's tendrils curled in confusion. So you free us and trust that we will not rebuild our empire. We do not trust you, Marcus corrected. We will monitor you and we will enforce the terms, and if you try to rebuild your empire, we will stop you. But you will not exterminate us, Kessrin said. No, Marcus agreed, because humanity wants the galaxy to remember this moment differently. He gestured around the facility. You tried to make us slaves, he said. We freed everyone instead, and that is the story that will spread across every star system. That humans are liberators. Kessrin finished. That humans come for their own, Marcus corrected, and that we will cross the galaxy to do it, Dr. Kessrin was quiet for a long moment. I have requested transfer to Earth, she said finally, to study human culture and society. Why? Marcus asked. Because I examined your bodies and thought I understood your species, she replied. But humans are not defined by biology. She looked at him directly. You are defined by memory and loyalty and an absolute refusal to abandon your own. And I want to understand how evolution created something like that. Marcus considered her request. That will be up to Earth Command, he said. But I think we can learn from each other. The last shuttle left Jrel Prime on day 42 after Marcus's capture. He stood at the viewport watching the purple world shrink below, and beside him sat 300 rescued humans. Heading home, Lieutenant Martinez joined him at the viewport. How does it feel? She asked. Strange, Marcus admitted. I volunteered expecting to gather intelligence and maybe sabotage some systems. Instead, you brought down an empire, Martinez said. I gave Earth an opportunity, Marcus corrected. The fleet did the rest. Martinez shook her head. You shut down their defenses and triggered the rebellions and forced their surrender, and you did it alone. She looked at the other rescued humans. Everyone here is alive because you volunteered. Marcus watched the stars. Humans do not leave their own behind, he said. That is not just a saying, Lieutenant. It is who we are. The Indomitable accelerated toward the edge of the system where faster than light drives would carry them home. Behind them, the Jrel Dominion began the long process of collapse and transformation, and ahead of them, Earth waited to welcome home its people, all of them, because humanity had sent a message to the galaxy: capture one of us and we will come for them, every time without exception, and we will not stop until they are free or you are broken. The message had been received across 14 liberated star systems. Formerly enslaved species looked to the stars with new hope. Across the Jrel territories, commanders and governors and military officers learned a hard lesson. Humanity remembers, humanity comes for its own, and humanity does not forgive those who take what is theirs. Marcus Chun closed his eyes and let himself relax for the first time in 42 days. The mission was complete. His people were going home, and the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. Behind him, Dr. Kesrin sat with her datapad making notes about human psychology and culture, and the strange species that valued individuals over empires. Remarkable, she whispered to herself, and in the depths of space, Earth's destroyer fleet maintained position around Jrel Prime, not as conquerors, but as liberators, making sure the galaxy remembered what humanity stood for: freedom, loyalty, and the absolute certainty that no human would ever be left behind. Not ever, not anywhere, not for any reason, because that was what it meant to be human. 5 years after Marcus Chen's capture, the galaxy looked very different. The Jrel Dominion existed only in history books and museum exhibits, and the once mighty empire had fragmented into independent systems that govern themselves without tribute or forced labor. Dr. Kesrin stood in a lecture hall at Seoul University on Earth, and her compound eyes tracked the rows of human students watching her with curiosity. Today we discuss the moment everything changed, she began, and her voice carried clearly through translation devices. The moment when the Jrel Dominion made its final and fatal mistake. She activated a holographic display showing Marcus Chen's mining vessel Prospector 7. We captured this ship 42 days before our empire fell, she continued. Inside was a single human who we designated Subject Zero. The students leaned forward with interest. Kesrin had become something of a celebrity on Earth as the Jrel scientist who helped Marcus disable the defense grid, and her lectures on xenobiology and comparative culture always drew large crowds. I examined Subject Zero extensively, she said. I measured his physical capabilities and tested his cognitive functions and calculated his potential uses in labor assignments. She paused, and her tendrils moved in the pattern humans had learned meant embarrassment. I thought I understood humans, she admitted, but I was examining the wrong things. A student raised her hand. What should you have examined, Doctor? Kesrin. The scientist pulled up neural scans and genetic data. I studied biology when I should have studied culture, she replied. I measured strength when I should have measured determination, and I calculated individual capability when I should have understood collective loyalty. She changed the display to show footage of Earth's destroyer fleet arriving at Jrel Prime. Humans are not defined by superior technology or physical advantages, Kesrin explained. They are defined by memory and persistence, and an absolute unwillingness to abandon their own. Another student spoke up. But the Jrel Dominion had conquered 14 species, he said. Why were humans different? Kesrin considered the question carefully. Every species we conquered fought desperately when we arrived, she answered, but once defeated they accepted their fate because Continued resistance seemed futile. She pulled up historical data on the rebellions. Humans do not think that way, she continued. When we took Marcus Chun, his entire species mobilized not because they thought they could win, but because abandoning him was unthinkable. The lecture hall fell quiet. That is the fundamental difference, Kasran said. Other species calculate odds and surrender when defeat seems certain. But humans factor loyalty into every equation, and they will attempt impossible things to recover their own. She looked at her students. We thought we were testing them by capturing one human, she finished. They were testing us, and we failed. After the lecture, Kasran walked through Earth's capital city and the transformed landscape. Still amazed her 5 years ago, this world had barely achieved orbital infrastructure now. It served as the de facto capital of the Free Systems Alliance, and 14 liberated species maintained embassies here, and human ships patrolled space lanes, ensuring no new empires rose to replace the Jral Marcus. Chun found her in a cafe near the university. He looked older now, with gray threading through his dark hair, but his eyes still held the same calculating intelligence. Good lecture, doctor, he said while sitting across from her. Thank you, Kasran replied, though I sometimes wonder if I am doing your species a disservice by explaining how you think. Marcus smiled. Knowledge should be shared, he said. That is how we prevent future conflicts. Kasran ordered tea through the automated system and watched humans and aliens moving together through the busy street outside. Your species has changed galaxy, she observed. We revealed what was always possible. Marcus corrected. Other species could have rebelled against the Dominion, but they needed someone to show them it could work. More than that, Kasran argued, you showed them that empires built on slavery are fundamentally unstable, because eventually you will capture someone whose people refuse to accept their loss. Marcus nodded. Slowly, every human learns from childhood that we do not leave our own behind, he said. It is built into our culture and our military and our approach to exploration. Because you are persistence hunters, Kasran said. Because we remember, Marcus replied. Every slight and every loss and every person taken from us, and we will cross any distance to settle those accounts. Kasran's tea arrived, and she sipped it carefully. The Jral High Command still does not fully understand what happened, she admitted. They see the tactical details about disabled defenses and coordinated rebellions, but they miss the strategic reality, Marcus finished, that humanity had been preparing for contact with hostile aliens for decades, and we were ready the moment you revealed yourselves. You let us think you were primitive, Kasran said. We showed you what we wanted you to see. Marcus agreed. Chemical rockets and fusion drives and projectile weapons, while we developed gravitic technology and energy weapons in secret. He looked out at the street. My great-grandfather fought in Earth's last World War, he continued. He taught me that deception is often more powerful than direct confrontation. So when Drell scouts appeared in your outer system, Kasran said slowly, you made sure they saw only primitive technology. And when they started abducting humans from isolated ships, Marcus continued, we prepared someone who would volunteer to be captured. Kasran's tendrils curled in understanding. How many others volunteered for your mission? She asked. 17, Marcus replied. I was selected because I had military training and language aptitude, and the right psychological profile. The profile to survive captivity and infiltrate an alien empire alone, Kesrin said. The profile to do whatever was necessary, Marcus corrected. They sat in silence. For a moment, do you regret it? Kesrin finally asked. Destroying our empire. Marcus considered the question. I regret the lives lost in the rebellions, he said, and I regret that it was necessary. He looked at her directly. But I do not regret freeing enslaved species or making sure the galaxy knows what happens when you capture a human. Kesrin nodded slowly. Your people have become the Vendée guarantors of freedom, she observed. Not because you sought that role, but because you demonstrated you would fight for it. Someone has to, Marcus replied, and humans have experience with empires and slavery, and we know how those systems eventually collapse. So you accelerated the collapse. Kesrin said, we provided the spark. Marcus agreed. The Zrel Dominion and its tributary system were already unstable, and they just needed someone to show them resistance was possible. Kesrin finished her. I am writing a book about human culture and psychology, she said. May I include our conversations? Only if you include the whole truth, Marcus replied, that humanity is not superior to other species. Then what makes you different? Kesrin asked. Memory, Marcus said. We remember our history and learn from it, and we remember every person taken from us, and we will not rest until they come home. He stood to leave. That is not biology, doctor, he continued. That is culture and choice and the accumulated wisdom of a species that climbed to dominance through persistence rather than strength. Kesrin watched him go and then returned to her notes. She wrote about the crystalline cell where she had examined Subject 0. She wrote about the moment she realized the human spoke perfect. Jrosh wrote about watching Marcus disable the defense grid that had protected Jrel Prime for centuries, and she wrote about the fundamental lesson the Zrel Dominion had learned too. Late never capture a human, because they will come for their own, every single time, with patience and planning and a persistence that borders on madness. They will cross the galaxy. They will infiltrate your defenses. They will learn your language and study your systems and find your weaknesses, and they will not stop until every human is free or your empire is ashes. That was the message the Zrel sent to the galaxy by capturing Marcus Chunnot. Intentionally, but completely. 5 years later, every species knew Earth maintained a small fleet and monitoring stations and mutual defense treaties, that they did not build an empire. They did not demand tribute. They did not enslave anyone. Instead, they freed others and protected the weak and demonstrated what galactic civilization could be when built on cooperation rather than conquest. And in museums across 14 liberated worlds, visitors stood before the crystalline cell that once held Marcus Chunde. Read the plaque explaining how one human infiltrated an empire and brought it down from within. They learned about the volunteer who knew he might die, but went anyway, and they understood the message. Humanity remembers. Humanity comes for its own, and humanity will never stop fighting for freedom, not for themselves, not for their own, not for anyone, because that is what it means to be human, to remember, to persist, to refuse to leave anyone behind. The first human the Zrel Dominion captured was also the last one they ever laid eyes on, because after Marcus Chun came home, no one ever dared capture a human again. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity had taken its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as liberators, making sure that what happened to the Zrel Dominion served as eternal warning touch. One of them, and they all come for you with Patience with planning with persistence and everyone comes. Home Warrior Empire falls. Those were the only op.